What's going on? I am with Nick O'Patterson today on the podcast. Nick, what's going on, brother?
Nothing much. I really appreciate you taking the time to let me come on. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, man. This is gonna be really a fun podcast. So Nick O'Patterson goes to Indiana University. He's 20 years old. He's studying in business at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana, and he actually reached out to me, a few weeks ago, and he just wanted to really interested in real estate. Read Rich Dad Poor Dad. A few years ago, and is really interested in real estate, wanted to ask me a lot of questions and just kind of, get a feel for how I had built, our real estate business at the Simple team here in Indianapolis. But I said, you know what, a fun idea would be, hey, maybe let's just turn this into a podcast. Some other people might be interested in this and hearing what we have to say to each other. So we're going to kind of set this podcast up with just a casual conversation. So there's no cameras on, Nick. It's just me and you, buddy. And
Yep.
we're just kind of set this up just like if we were sitting down for a cup of coffee in Bloomington, Indiana. I'm not sure of a coffee shop in there, but what's your favorite coffee shop in Bloomington?
Honestly, I'm not like a big coffee drinker.
No problem.
But honestly, I would say my favorite coffee spot to, I guess, like study is there's a Starbucks in the IMU, which is like a big Indiana Memorial Union. And they have like a fire pit in there with a bunch of couches. So
Nice.
there's an ambiance to the room. So
Yeah,
I go there if
that
I'm
sounds
going
awesome.
anywhere.
That sounds awesome. We'll just pretend like we're there. We're sitting down for a non-coffee drink, whatever you like, and I'll drink my coffee. And we're just kind of sitting down and we're just going to have a casual conversation about your future real estate. You can ask me anything on this podcast. I'm pretty much an open book. So that's how we're going to set this up, guys. This is going to be fun. Nick, this is Nick's very first podcast. So you're going to be awesome. So let's just take it away. So, Nick, awesome, man. It's good to meet you here, and man, you can ask me anything, any type of question, and I'll let you take it away, man.
All right, sounds good. I guess I want to start this off to like where everything began. So post graduating Huntington University, were your intentions to like go into real estate initially? Yeah, I guess I'll just start with that.
Yeah. No, man, that's a really loaded question. Honestly, no. So I went to Huntington. I got an elementary education degree. I was going to be a teacher because my parents were both teachers. My dad, he taught high school and he was a basketball coach for 33 years. And so that's what my parents did. So I just figured, you know what, that's what I'll do. My mom was an early childhood teacher, so she taught preschool. And so I got out of Huntington. I taught for about a year, but I always had this kind of business sense. Even as a kid, I would buy and sell things. Like I would buy and sell candy at
Yeah.
school, or that
Yep.
transitioned into buying and selling stereo equipment. That transitioned to I would buy and sell cars. I'd buy a beater car and clean it out and buy it for $700 and I'd sell it for 1,500. And then that transitioned into houses. So honestly, I didn't start my real estate career until I was about 27. So I was, about 4 or 5 years out of college. How it kind of began was, long story short, I was teaching, just didn't enjoy that. Didn't feel like that was going to be my long-term solution. Like I said, my dad was a teacher for 30 years. And I remember him telling me one time that he never remembered having more than $5,000 like ever in his bank account. And it's like, 33 years, I wanted this more freedom than that. And that didn't really suit me well. I love teachers. I think we need teachers. We need good teachers, but it just wasn't suited for me. So I ended up moving back home. And then dad actually introduced me to a land investor actually out of Bloomington, and he would buy big pieces of hunting ground and he would sell them to hunters, honestly. And he also owned a timber company, so he would harvest some of the timber off of these 100-acre big pieces of land, and he was looking for just bird dogs and people to help him find deals. And that was kind of how I got started. And I used to ride around with him, and I would look for these, 50 acre, 100 acre big pieces of land, and he would buy them, and he'd pay me 10% on that deal. And I remember one of my checks was $7,000, and that just kind of hit me that my dad after 33 years, he never had more than $5,000 in his bank account, and then I just got a deal for $7,000, and I was like, wow, what was that? And that's just kind of how it all started. Got me introduced to real estate. Again, read books like Rich Dad Poor Dad. But yeah, it took me about 5 years out of college before I really started getting interested.
Awesome. You kind of mentioned that it was kind of like with you're kind of JVing, kind of like that was like your first mentor. Um, what kind of impact do you think mentors had on your career, and what tips would you give to a young person trying to find a mentor?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Um, I Yes. So was he kind of one of my very first mentors? I would say yes. He was a great businessman. I learned a lot of things that he did well and that what he didn't do well, and that I felt like I could definitely do what he did, right? So that kind of gave me the confidence of riding around with him, and he wasn't anything special. He was a multimillionaire, but wasn't any different than me and anybody else. And no, but he talked differently. I'd say he talked where it just kind of gave me the confidence. Where he would do a deal and he'd make $200,000 or $300,000, and it really wasn't that big of deal. But from my world, in the teaching world, that's just not where I came from. So it really reminded me similarly of kind of that rich dad, poor dad analogy, where my parents weren't poor by any means, but we were very middle class. And that was fine. I grew up, I didn't really think anything differently than that. But I always just wanted, like you said before the show, just that freedom. And I knew I could never have that with just working that job, living from paycheck to paycheck. So I would say he was one of my very first mentors. I've had many mentors along the way. I call them maybe organic mentors, where our paths cross, and I worked for him, right? And I think that's one of the greatest ways to build that mentorship is, especially as a young person, if you can be an intern with a company, if you can work alongside someone. Sometimes it's hard, because a lot of businessmen are busy, and we're running our businesses, we have families, and we're just busy in life. So for us to take time out to meet with someone, regularly, that has to be a very special situation. So I'd say one of the best things is, if you want to really be around that person, can you work with them in somehow? Can you be a bird dog for them? Can you find them deals? Can you bring them value in some way? And that's what I did with one of my first mentors. Other mentors along the way, I've paid for mentors. I've paid for mentorship, which I think is fine. I'm a big, advocate of mastermind sort of groups. So, getting in the room with like-minded people, I think is just great. Again, businessmen and entrepreneurs, we just think a little bit differently than other people. So I think if you can get in a room in some sort of mastermind setting, I think that's a great step in the right direction. And maybe it could be, I know you're in classes and things like that, but there's a difference between a class setting and an education setting, and then a mastermind setting. In a mastermind setting, we're really opening up, we're really talking about our challenges, and then the group is there to help you with your challenges. So that's been a huge thing, and other mentors have come out of that setting. So I'd say if I was young, I would find a good company that I wanted to align myself with, and is there an opening to bring them some sort of value as an intern, or can you work for them? Can you bring them deals? That's where I would start, and that's how I started.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate that. Guess I want to transition into like the beginning of your wholesaling career. When was like the time period between when you kind of realized wholesaling was what you wanted to pursue and then the birth of simple wholesaling?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So we bought our first house around 2007. This was a time and a season of the real estate market crash. So 2008, a lot of people were kind of running for the hills. They didn't want anything to do with real estate. Maybe they had lost a lot of money. They were scared and worried about everything. And for me, I was new, didn't really know a whole lot about real estate. All I knew was I tried to develop some sort of process or system of putting in offers. And back then, we would just put in offers to the MLS and buy a lot of bank owned properties. That's how we got started. And it worked. We just buy cheap properties and we sell them to other investors for a few $1,000s more. Didn't really know what it was called, honestly, back then. And then we kind of coined this phrase wholesaling. I didn't coin it, but now it's just a regular term in the real estate industry. But the funny thing was, I always thought that wholesaling was kind of that starting strategy, but I would graduate into something different, something bigger and better, maybe fixing and flipping properties or rental properties and things like that. And I started to do some of that. And honestly, I was a fix and flipper for about 3 or 4 years. My dad, he retired from teaching. He came and helped me, and I just remember we were in houses. And Dad was putting in cabinets, Mom was painting, and I was sanding floors, and that's what we were doing. And we did that for about 3 or 4 years. But I'll tell you, fixing and flipping and managing contractors and fixing up houses, and I just realized, for me personally, someone that's really gifted at that, I applaud that because it's tough. But for me, like, there was so many different ways to kind of lose money. If you really think about it, fixing and flipping properties, a lot of times it could cost you a lot more money than what you think, right? Or it takes a lot more time than what you think, which again costs you more money because time is money. And then you finally get done with the house, and then you have to sell it to a buyer, and then they get a loan, and then the appraiser comes out, and then the inspector comes out, and there's all these things that can go wrong, which they did, and ended up where we thought we were going to make this huge profit ends up being not as big, a smaller profit. So honestly, back in 2014, I think I was fixing and flipping about 6 or 7 properties at that time at one time. I had some tough things going on. My wife and I had a baby, so we had that, and I had a contractor that had ripped off, some money, so I had that going on, and just all these things just kind of like weighing in on me, and I just realized I'm just gonna go back into wholesaling. I want to go back into simple wholesaling. I like chasing deals, and I like that aspect of the business. That's kind of where simple wholesaling was born. I wanted a simple business. Honestly, that's why I had this. I felt like I had this complicated business, and I just wanted to simplify it down, and that's where Simple Wholesaling was born. It was born about 2014, and then here we are, nearly 10 years later. Hundreds or thousands of deals later.
Awesome. So being able to have that deal inflow of like over 300 properties a year, how have you guys been able to scale from those early stages up to employing more than 10 plus people on your guys' team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just say, it started off pretty slow. My very first hire, honestly, was I heard about people writing letters, and they would mail out these letters to individuals, to private homeowners, and that was my very first hire. I had a friend, and I said, "Hey, you want to write these letters for me?" And he said, "Yes." So that was my first hire, and I paid him $0.25 a letter. And that was it. And he worked with me for about 5 years. He went from that to he helped with our closings. He even helped with some of our property management and just things like that. And really, I always looked at things like my dad always taught me this kind of concept is like, why would you pay someone to do it when you can just do it yourself? So I always kind of had that in my mind, and I was working with my dad, for the first 5 years, and then when Simple Wholesaling was born, I kind of went out on my own. Dad retired and went out on my own, but I always had this concept in my mind, like, why would I pay someone else to do it when I can just do it myself? But then later I started to think about, I don't really want to do it. And there were certain things I didn't want to do in the business, and it was kind of draining me out. So I said, what if I paid someone? And a lot of times people look at paying someone as this expense, and I started looking at it as an asset. I'm like, okay, number one, what if this person just makes the amount of money for the company that I'm paying them, but I get 100% of my time back? Like, would that be worth it? And I started saying, okay, I think that would be worth it. But what usually happens is they not only make the money that you're paying them, but they make more than that, maybe 2 times or 3 times more than what you're paying them. So now you're making more money, plus you got 100% of your time back. And that's where I started just to see this beauty of business and scaling a business. And then eventually it turned into, I don't want to do that task. And I hired that out. And then I started to just do that on everything. And eventually I actually stepped out of my business in 2019. And someone else actually was running as CEO for the last 3 years. Now, recently, in the past 6 weeks, because of the real estate market and some other circumstances, I've had to step back in. But for 3 years, I honestly wasn't even in the business at all. So we were doing 250, 300 deals a year, and I didn't do anything. So that's the beauty, I think, of business that people don't really think about. Because most businesses are, honestly, even to this day, are solopreneurs where there's a couple people maybe involved, but the owner is heavily, heavily, heavily involved. And I'd say that doesn't always have to be the case. It depends on what you want. If you want to be that, that's fine. But the beauty really of businesses is you can scale it to a point where like it can really run without you. And that's the beauty of it if you put the right people in the right seats.
Yeah, I remember mentioning like 2 years ago, um, a lot of you were talking about creating systems and automation within your business so that you could step away. What did that process look like, and how long did it take to kind of fine tune these systems to allow yourself to take a step
Mm-hmm.
back?
Yeah. I mean, it all takes a time training someone. The problem is the trap that people get into is that they don't train people. They just continuously do it because they know how to do it, and they don't train. They don't spend the time training that person. And that's just a trap, right? And then eventually they just keep the same cycle. They just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So yeah, we just started to try to develop processes and systems to train people. So with technology these days, there's a lot of different ways. Just using Google Drive, sharing folders, using a CRM system, I think was very, very key for us. Now we use Salesforce, which is a pretty robust system that we can kind of keep everything in one place. We can keep our leads in one place. We can keep our deals in one place. We can try to communicate in one place. And I think that's one of the biggest things is how can you, it's really just all about like, how can you organize and train and build these processes out so you don't always have to be just in the middle of everything. So how can you train this person to do this job without asking you a question? All right. I try to simplify things down. And so every single day they kind of know what to do. So we create videos, we have instructions, and the beauty of it is I don't even create a lot of the training materials. A lot of times the people that are doing the job are actually the ones I just asked them, I was like, hey, whatever you're doing, can you write out the instructions on how to do this? Because what if they're not doing that anymore? Then someone else needs to know how to do that. And a lot of times we don't do that. We don't have, we train people, but then they know how to do it, but then business or life happens and then they leave and then now we're stuck and we got to figure out, okay, we don't have any of the stuff we just learned. So for us, yeah, CRM system was huge, sharing documents, building out just instructions, passing the baton, I think is just huge when you're building teams, because it's just this. I mean, you mentioned engineering before the show. It's almost like this engineering process of like, okay, this happens, this purchase agreement comes in, and then what do we do with it, and who does it with it? Okay, you send it to the title company. Okay, now the title company has it. Now what is our process? Like, who's going to do what? And our process might look like, we have a transaction coordinator. They're dealing with the title company, but maybe we need to get a loan on the property. So, okay, who does that? And then now, okay, we buy the property, or now we're going to close on it. Now we got to get pictures of the property. So, okay, who's going to do that, and how are we going to pass the baton on that? Now we're going to sell the property. Okay, who does that? Okay, now we sell the property. Now it's going to go back to the title company. It's just this whole weave of passing the baton back and forth. And I think, it might start off on a piece of paper, but then you can use lucid charts and just kind of develop this. But so it's really, there's one piece of developing the process and system. And sometimes that people are the beauty, they can do that. But the problem is executing it, and because you have messy people doing this process, and then now it's trying to keep them accountable. And that's where the messiness kind of comes in, because somebody might drop the baton, right? Well, what if they drop the baton? Yeah. Then what do you do? So it's just this constant tweaking and be like, okay, there's still holes here. And I'll tell you this, no business is ever going to be perfect. If you look inside of our business still has holes in it. It still has gaps in it. We're still trying to fill. But each week we're just trying to get, fill a couple of gaps here and try to get a little bit better.
Awesome. I guess, how have you guys been able to expand, like triple your deal flow, like within the last 3 years? What strategies have you set in place to reach that?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've learned throughout the whole years is just taking your foot off of learning and growing. A lot of times we might learn something and it's working, and it works for like 2 years. And we're like, oh, great, we got it. Like, this is going to last us forever, and this is all we're going to have to do. And then all of a sudden something changes. The market changes, or someone leaves in your company, or the process just doesn't work anymore because now it's saturated and there's so many people doing that particular strategy. So I feel like you're just constantly having to grow and learn and pivot. I've had to pivot so many times in this business. Like I said, when we first started, we were putting in a lot of offers on the MLS through bank-owned properties, and that worked. And that worked for like 3 years, and then it didn't work anymore. And then we switched to fixing and flipping, and then we did that, and that was a tough job, like I mentioned. And then we went back into wholesaling, and we were writing letters for people. We were mailing out letters, and that worked for a while until everyone started doing it. And then we're thinking, okay, what other strategies can we do? So we've tried texting, we've tried cold calling, we've tried TV, all these other marketing strategies that we've tried. And that's just on the acquisition side. And on the disposition side, there's other strategies that we've tried as well. We've tried selling for cash. We've tried seller financing our properties. We've tried listing them on the MLS versus our cash buyers list. And you are constantly having to pivot. And what worked yesterday doesn't always work today. So right now, we're honestly in that season of pivoting. We're like, okay, the market is starting to tighten up. So how are we going to change, and how are we going to respond to the change, and how are we going to pivot? And that's where like the beauty of entrepreneurship comes in, because you're constantly having to just be creative and just try things. And so honestly, that's been, I don't know how many changes or pivots. People have came, people have gone, and it's an ever-ending just change. Honestly, that's the thing I will know for certain. The only thing I'm certain about is change.
Yeah, awesome. regarding like creative financing and like those kind of deals, how are how do you guys typically like aim to structure those deals?
Hmm. Yeah, there's so many different ways. The beauty about real estate is there's so many different ways to skin a cat, and I think that's the beauty of it. So a lot of times, and this is one of the creative strategies that we're kind of thinking around, is that typically before we would make an offer on a property, we would say, hey, we're going to make this cash offer, no commissions, buy it as is. We can close in a week. And that was kind of our pitch. And now like other people are doing that, so it doesn't work that well anymore. So now we got to think about other creative. What if they don't want to sell it for your cash price? Is there other ways that you can pay higher prices but still buy the property? And there is. I was actually had a guy on a podcast, and he talked about this novation strategy, and this is something we're kind of like dabbling with. But basically, it's I don't know all the details about novation. The novation strategy is, but basically, you can do a novation where you don't have to buy the property, you don't have to fund the property, but you can have this agreement with the seller, and you can still list the property on the MLS, and other borrowers that are going to get an FHA loan, or they're going to get a some sort of loan, which they can't really do on assignment deals types of properties. You can do this novation strategy. So that's another strategy that we can, but these are prettier houses. So these aren't, the ugly houses. So that's a strategy that we're thinking about using. I love, some sort of the seller financing strategy. So we've done where like maybe they don't even want all their money right now. There's benefits to buying a property, and they can seller finance you. They don't have to pay all their taxes right now, and just things like that. So we're thinking about, okay, and we can pay higher prices for those types of properties. So offering seller financing. We've bought properties subject to on their mortgage. So we've came in the properties where maybe they're behind on their mortgage by a few payments, and they can't pay their mortgage. Well, we'll come in and we'll take over their mortgage, and then we'll maybe rent out the property, right? So now we get this mortgage that's at a pretty low interest rate. Maybe it's a 3 or 4%. We can rent out the property, and so we pay back their mortgage payments. So there's a lot of different ways, and I would just say, get creative. So when a lot of people say no, they're not going to take our cash offer. This is when the other strategies kind of come into play. But I love doing, can we be a deal architect is what I call it. Can we come in and just, create a deal out of that, and just give them kind of what they want.
Awesome. I guess more into like the personal aspect of your life. What kind of systems do you set in place to balance your business like with your personal life and your family?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I've definitely seen a lot of entrepreneurs just kind of fail in this particular area. I heard one entrepreneur that had gotten divorced. He said, there's no amount of public success that will take the place of private failure. And this has just been a struggle, I believe, in a lot of people's lives. So for me, I mean, I definitely have not gotten this perfect, but I do know that, especially during this season of my life, is I try to ask myself, what am I really going to say yes to, and what am I going to say no to? My yeses are extremely slow right now. So if people ask me to do something, I have to just take a step back and just say, okay, is this the best thing for me? Is this the best thing for my family? And just kind of, extremely slow yeses. I would just say take things really, really slow. And you have to just put boundaries around your life. Business is always going to be there. Money is always going to be there. And you're juggling a lot, right? You got business, you got finances, but then you got your wife, you got your kids, you got your health. And that stuff doesn't bounce back if it shatters. I think one guy was talking about how, if you're juggling, um, you know, these balls, and you got your family and your wife and your business and money, that if you drop, like, a lot of the balls are just made out of glass. Like, if you drop your family or you drop your relationship with your spouse, that can really just shatter, and it's hard to bounce back from. A business, that's more of a rubber ball that, like, I can put that on pause for a while and it can always bounce back. But I've seen a lot of guys sacrifice everything for business, for success, and whatever that is, they don't even know why most of the time. Maybe it's a recognition, maybe it's just power or money. But I'd say balancing is hard. So just drawing boundaries around your life, making sure at night you have that time with your family, you have that intentional time with your wife. Yeah, that's all I can really say. So stuff that we do is, I don't do things typically after dinner and until we go to bed. We put the kids to bed. My wife and I typically have an hour each night. We just hang out, we just veg out, talk about whatever. So that's things that we do. We just implemented a day date. So on Thursdays, we have about an hour and a half day date, which is different for us. So it's like in the middle of our work day, of my work day. So we just implemented things like that. We do date nights. And just that one-on-one time with your kids is just super important. So all that's really important. And I would just say, put goals around all of that just as much, if not more, than you put goals around your business. I see a lot of people, they put so many goals around their business, but they don't put goals around their family or their marriage, or what do they want with that? What do they want to be with their kids? So I would just say, make sure you set goals around that, and your health too, because I've seen a lot of guys sacrifice their health.
Awesome. So I guess, like, how do you align those personal goals that you have, like, with your business goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the biggest thing is, it starts off with personal goals. I think you got to start off, what do you really want your life to look like? And if you are married, I would, you can do that separately, but I would definitely align it with your wife. We just went through a program and we just did that. And when you're married, you're kind of one, right? So you might have these big things over here that you want to do, but your wife might have these other things. So just making sure, what are you aligned on? What are you on the same page on? So I just say, I think it's really important to start off with your personal goals, and then align your business goals with your personal goals. I see it so many times the other way around, and this isn't rocket science, but you would be amazed by how many guys say, "Oh, I set all these business goals, but I don't set any of my personal goals." And they're just running, and they're constantly running around this rat race, money and business, because they just want to grow for the sake of growing, but they don't have their goals set over here. So, I mean, before the show, you mentioned you wanted freedom, right? So I would just really start to define what that is for you. I think that's different for different people. So start to define, what does that life even look like? And, what are you doing when you're free? What is that? And a lot of times you'd be really surprised that a lot of times you don't have to have a lot of money to do some of those things, that you really, really enjoy. So I'd start just writing down, you want a life of freedom. Okay. What does that look like? What would I do with my life in freedom? What are some of the activities that I would do? And just start dreaming and writing down those things. And then, taking your business and trying to align it with that. And honestly, like, for me, it's funny, my life, honestly, of freedom, it probably doesn't even cost that much money, honestly. So, like, I think I've reached my goals as far as income. Like, I remember when I was young 20s, I said, you know what, if I could have this amount of money and then I could just maybe lend it out and earn interest on this amount of money, and then I would just be just set. And I've reached that, I've surpassed that, but I still continuously grow and grow because and maybe it's not always aligned with my personal goals. So I say this is an ever, you always have to kind of be thinking about this and setting down each quarter. You should be writing down, what you want. Is your business aligning with your goals? Because if you don't decide, here's the thing I'll probably leave you with on this is, if you don't decide what you really want, and you don't decide what you want your life to look like, well, somebody's going to decide it for you. And you might not even think that someone is deciding it for you, but if you start to really think about things, maybe, and you start to really dig deep inside of yourself, like sometimes you're building your business and it's not even for you. It's like it's for what other people want you to be, or for what other people, for you to see in the eyes of other people and to get their approval for some reason. So I would really just concentrate on digging deep on what you want and making sure your business aligns with it.
Awesome. I guess what are some of your like long-term personal goals and then like some long-term goals for for simple wholesaling?
Yeah. Um, yeah. For me, honestly, let's see, long-term personal goals. I enjoy creating environments to pour into other kind of businessmen. I'm a man of faith too, so we've created something on Iron Deep, and basically it's a community organization of guys, business owners, that we can get together. We're all of faith, and kind of just sharpen each other, be radically honest with each other, and kind of be open. And I love that type of environment, pouring into those guys. That's just one thing I do see in my life. I would love to be mentors to my family too. My kids, we started setting goals and just doing little things here and there. I think that's awesome, just seeing them reach their goals, whether it's so tiny, but just seeing them light up for that and just being a mentor to them. As far as, and just really just enjoying my life with my wife and doing the things that we love. And honestly, I think I'm tired of hurrying. This is one of my big things this year is, and you'll see this is, when you're growing a business and you're trying to balance all this stuff, it's just like sometimes you got a lot of weight on you, and you're kind of hurrying around, and you got so many different things pulling at your attention. So for me, I told my wife, like, I desire peace, and I desire just a slower life. And if that means less deals, then that's it. That's fine. So for me, I think, yeah, that's one thing. I just want that little bit of a slower life to go deeper in relationships with people, and to not be so just hurried, I guess. As far as
I feel you.
as far as the simple team, yeah, I mean, we've done a few thousand deals over the past several years. I think that we will be trying to do more creative and bigger deals, honestly. It's kind of one of those things that, I come from teaching, right? So, like I said, my dad, he would make $60,000 a year teaching, and I would, starting off teachers make like $30,000 a year. And I heard this one guy say, he ran a business, and he talked about if you could turn your annual income into your monthly income. He was called like the ATM business, annual income into your monthly income. And that really hit me because I was like, man, like, who could ever do that? That's crazy, it's stupid. And I was, in my 20s at that time, and then we did that, and I started making, instead of $30,000 a year, I made $30,000 a month. And then it kind of, so I think just like that was a big shift there. And before, like, wholesaling deals, like, we would make 5,000 on a property and be like, well, that's great, 5,000 on a property. And then it turned into 10,000 on a property. And then there's some deals we've made 20,000 on a property. And there's some deals we've actually made 40 or 50,000 on a property. So I guess I want to transition. My thinking is just like the ATM or the 5 to 10. Now I'm like, Could you do a bigger deal and do 500,000 on a property? Could you do $1 million on a property? And that's not, you can't really do that on single family homes. So that's going to take, some sort of a bigger deal. So I'm kind of digging into land a little bit like I used to, how I first got started. Maybe, more apartment types of deals. So I'm thinking about that, because those you can actually, you could wholesale an apartment complex. You could wholesale flip a storage unit. You could do 200-acre piece of land, right? So I want to give myself the opportunity to do that, because that would be a lot easier than doing 200 deals. So
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Guess I want to jump more into like if you had to go back through your career, would there be anything that, or even in your personal life, is there anything that you would change or do differently?
hmm um couple things. Yeah. Number one, like I said, I think the first like 6 or 7 years of our business, I kind of did with my dad, and we didn't, I didn't really hire a coach or run around in mastermind groups, things like that. So I would do that more earlier in my career. Try to get out of my own way, and maybe hire someone earlier instead of doing it all myself the first 6 or 7 years. That's one thing I would have done earlier. And really just kind of learn about how to do the business. Another thing that I would have done, I think what I mentioned to you, is I would have so at the beginning, I wrote down my personal goals a lot. Like I kind of knew what I wanted, my personal goals, but then you kind of get in things and time goes on and you just stop thinking about that and you start getting more into business stuff. So I think I would spend more time figuring out what I wanted personally. And still do the business, but I would write down more of my personal goals. I think going away on some sort of 2-day 3-day retreats, especially when you're young, and just focus on what do you want, like dreaming about what you want, writing them out, instead of doing it kind of sporadically. I would do some more retreats, things like that, and just start writing down, what I wanted personally. Because I feel like a lot of times in my business, I did what other people wanted. I did what other people expected of me. There's been times where, I didn't even have the business maybe that I wanted. I had the business that grew to a size because that's what you're supposed to do. Is you're supposed to grow and you're supposed to do a bunch of deals, and then it wasn't maybe what I wanted. So I would start really thinking about, again, like, what do I want? What's good for myself? What's good for my family? Instead of sacrificing. So a lot of times I think I sacrifice my own desires for other people's wants and desires.
Awesome. I guess going on to like books and information, what have been some of the most like impactful books on your like personal life and career, and like how and why those affected you?
Yeah. I think, you've already mentioned, obviously, Rich Dad Poor Dad. A lot of people mention that particular book. It just kind of opens up your mind of cash flow and what that looks like. I'd say another book that I typically recommend for people is called The Millionaire Next Door. It's a book basically about, they studied millionaires and what are the characteristics of millionaires in America. And a lot of times it's not what you find. A lot of times it is the person literally living next door. You would just never know they're a millionaire because they don't really show it, right? So that's a great book that really changed my life. Other books, that I really recommend on helping me build a business was the book, there's 2 books, Traction and Scaling Up. Those are 2 business books I think are really, really phenomenal. Traction and Scaling Up, those really help wrap my mind around building a business. One book that I've recently read that has really started to hit me, there's 2 books actually I recently read that really hit me in this season of my life. One of them is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Great book. just about eliminating hurry from your life. And another book really to go along with that is Essentialism. Another great book that I just think about, like, what are the non-essential things you're wasting time on or money on? And yeah, like life is just too short. We're so just bombarded with just non-essential crap in our life. And I think that if you can really get focused, write down what you want. That's why it's so important to just start, writing that stuff down and just to start going after the essential things in your life. I think is just so important. So those are a few.
Awesome. Regarding relationships, you talk a lot about relationships. How have you been able to create quality relationships and maintain them?
Um, just personally or business?
Honestly, both.
Yeah. Um, I just think that I don't know. I just think we live in a life that like people are really surprised like by the smallest things. We live in a life that like we don't we don't reach out to people. We don't we don't share gratefulness to people. We don't like give them a little surprise or write them a letter of thankfulness of how much they mean to you in life. Um, we don't do anything like that anymore. Even in business, like you don't see a lot of even businesses, and when you do receive something, it's just not personal. It's just not. It's just another corporate little thing that they send out to 100 people. So I'd say if you can, wake up each day and can you build and do something for other people, can you just reach out to people? You just be surprised, like people, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you, writing someone a little letter of thankfulness, sending them a little gift, and yeah, and you can't have a lot of deep relationships, so I really focus on the depth of relationships. So um yeah, so I just say, just some of those small things and just being intentional, because people just aren't anymore. They're so consumed with themselves. They're so consumed with their own life. They don't reach out to anybody. They're not connected to anybody. They're lonely. And that's just our culture right now. So, like, honestly, I don't think it takes a whole lot of work to build deep relationships because no one's doing it. So,
Awesome.
yeah, man.
I guess onto Iron Deep. Um, when did you like realize that was something that you wanted to start, and how have you been able to build a community of like-minded individuals?
Yeah. Um, I think honestly, people are just craving community. People are like I said, people aren't connected. I mean, they even the people that have the most followers on social media or whatever, influencers, whatever, they're just not connected to anybody. They don't have deep relationships. And I think that if you can build an environment that people can build depth and just have some of that deep relationships, that I think it's just huge. So that's really what Iron Deep's about. Iron Deep's really just about, number one, we're a very niche community. Number one, we're men, right? So I feel like I've chosen men because we can talk about things in that setting than if there's women in the room. We're business owners, so we think a certain way. We're type A driven types of individuals. We have the pressures of business on us that we can't get just at any normal retreat. We're men of faith, so obviously that sets us apart from other mastermind groups. So we have that language with us, and we get radically honest with each other. And I think that just sets us apart from, if you go to church, if you go to other mastermind groups, if you go to other places, like we're here for each other, we want to cheer each other on. We're just radically honest. Like I'll tell those guys anything about me that, it's just that's just the environment that we're in. So I think that's just what's different. We don't have to wear masks. And I wanted that environment. I was like, I looked around and I didn't have that in my life. So I said, you know what? Let's just create it. And there's other retreats out there, but I think there's not a whole lot of business owner men of faith that can get radically honest with each other types of communities, and that's just what it is. So
I think it's something really cool that you've built. Um,
Thanks, man.
Um, if you had to give advice to a young person like me who is trying to get to the place where you're at today, what advice would you give them?
Oh man, I think that if you can just start young, um, I think that's just key, man. Just start to just take one foot in front of the other. It's just that compound effect. It's that compound interest effect. You know, if you can start getting some traction early and young, uh, yeah, by the time you're 30 years old, I mean, you're gonna be ahead, and not just compounding money. That's just one piece of it, but compounding your relationships. Like we talked about that mentorship. If you want to do this, then I would say, yeah, go work in that industry for a while. Maybe the leader of the organization is a mentor. Maybe there's other people in that community that can be mentors. So mentorship, I think, is key, but also taking action. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've learned is just by doing it. You can only learn so much from a book. You can only learn so much from a podcast. I can tell you how to talk to sellers, but when you're actually talking to a seller, you're gonna fumble, you're gonna trip up, you're gonna get tongue tied, you're not gonna know what to say. But just practicing it over and over again, I think is key. Um, yeah, so I think those are a couple of the things, and then just keep going, man. Just keep one step in front of the other. You don't have to be this successful multimillionaire overnight. It'll happen, but just keep doing the work, keep going, take one foot in front of the other. Set your personal goals, set your business goals, um, and yeah, that's just some of the advice I'd definitely give, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Um, I do not know if I have any more questions.
No, thanks, Nick.
Um, yeah, sorry, continue.
No, that's good. No, I think thanks for asking all these questions. It kind of brings me back, and I appreciate it so much. Just for you taking the time to ask me questions. I'd love to just hop on another call if you wanted to do that outside the podcast. But I thank you for spending some time with me today, man, and it's been awesome. So thank you so much, brother.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing me on the podcast today, and I would love to talk outside of the podcast sometime.
Sounds good. Well, this is going to be a wrap for the podcast, guys. So if you're interested just in more, make sure you guys go check out, again, our website, Iron Deep, if you're interested in that men's community. If you're in the Indianapolis community as well, we're actually launching our Indie Investor podcast back up. So make sure you guys check that out too. So it's a wrap. So thanks, Nick.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.